Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and Ya Ali Madad. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you all to tonight's event for what promises to be an informative and inspiring evening. My name is Dr. Rabia, and I am board member for the Aga Khan Health Board, which is a volunteer organisation under the Ismaili Council for the United Kingdom. The Aga Khan Health Board is dedicated to the improvement of the physical and mental health of the Ismaili community, which we number approximately 30,000 people across the United Kingdom jurisdiction. And we do this through educational programs, healthcare resources, and community outreach. Tonight is special because it is the first event to launch our Wellbeing and Lifestyle Committee, which is a subcommittee of the Aga Khan Health Board. Many people ask me, what is well-being all about? And my usual response to that question is to answer with a question. And that question is, what does it mean in your being to feel well? As a practicing doctor in the NHS, I can tell you that we are very good at reacting to disease. We know how to treat you when you get sick, but we're not very good at prevention, helping you live longer and happier lives, being healthy so that you don't become sick in the first place. So our committee is here to encourage you, no, implore you to do just that. And that journey begins tonight. So everyone who's decided to be here on this Friday evening is part of that journey. As humans, we spend approximately 1/3 of our lives asleep. Why is that? What exactly is the purpose of sleep? Perhaps it's just a nuisance of necessity, a biological quirk designed to slow us down, even though our society doesn't want us to. Except some of us in this very room know how awful it feels when we get a poor night's sleep. And some of us love sleep so much that we do it during the day as well. Does sleep have an impact on your weight? Does sleep have an impact on your nutrition? Does sleep have an impact on your mood? I'll be honest, I don't have the answers. And so we invited someone who most certainly does. Allow me to introduce our expert speaker for tonight, Dr. Katherina Lederle, a sleep and body clock specialist who is passionate about helping others take care of sleep as an act of self-care. She holds a PhD in human circadian physiology and behavior, as well as an MSc in biosciences. And she combines this rich scientific understanding with mindfulness, acceptance and compassion-based therapies to practice a holistic, non-drug approach to sleep problems. Dr. Kat, as she likes to be known, specializes in women's sleep in particular and can help us understand how our female biology can better support a woman to sleep well. And so now, please join me in putting your hands together for a very warm welcome to Dr. Kat.
Just to start with the last sentence Rabia was saying, if you do fall asleep, I won't feel offended, right? It's the best thing that can happen if someone falls asleep in my presence, because then my job is done. So, warm welcome for me as well. Thank you for the wonderful introductory words. Thank you very much. So I'm Dr. Kat, and my background is in sleep and chronobiology. And chronobiology, for those who don't know, it relates to your circadian rhythms, your inner body clock. So we all have a body clock. It's an area up here in your brain, sort of really in the middle. It's about 50,000 cells, and we collectively call this the clock. And this clock, in a way, governs everything from a timing perspective. It's like I often liken it to an orchestra, and the clock is the conductor. Like the conductor tells each musician when to play and when not to play, and sometimes it's a group of musicians playing. The clock very much does the same. It tells every cell, every organ in the body what time it is and when a certain function should happen and when not. And that's where the overlap with sleep comes in, because our body, we need to be told when to be awake, and that is during the day, and when to be asleep. And like I said, that's sort of the overlap. And for my PhD, I worked predominantly with older people, so no offense, older in my case meant anyone over 60, who had a sleep problem, and providing them with a light therapy, so more light during the day, would that improve their sleep? In theory it does, and it certainly does, but in my sort of PhD, it was not in the lab, it was in the field, so it was very confounding. But we could tell that morning light is really what is important for a good night's sleep. And there you have your first takeaway, right? Strong morning light. Okay, so let me start, because there was something else I just mentioned, that the body clock is what tells our body when to be awake and when to be asleep. And as I was preparing for this talk, as you do, you read a lot, and I found out that Islam and in the Quran, there's a lot of mentioning of sleep. And the Prophet, he said, you should pray as long as you feel active, and when you get tired, sleep. And I really love that, right? When you get tired, you leave everything, you go and sleep. And there are many, many other quotes, you know, I could show you, where there is a mentioning of sleep. But I thought this is a really lovely one, because it gets at the core, this appreciation for sleep. Now, a quick overview of what we will cover today, this evening. First of all, a bit of scene setting. We'll talk about why sleep matters to you. And by the way, I should say, I'm trying to make this interactive, so I will ask you to do some polls and share your thoughts later on. Then I'll talk a little bit about sleep during Ramadan, because I thought, you know, that is what you're all kind of experiencing right now. So let's talk about sleep, what is known, before we then talk a little bit about habits, how to support your sleep. And we'll go into more detail in our fireside chat and later on when we open up for questions as well. So this is overall a bit of a scene setting, my talk tonight. So your data. So some of you, in fact 113, were so kind to answer the following question. How would you rate the quality of your sleep? 1 being poor and 10 being excellent. Right. And what we see here, let me just see if this, yeah, it works roughly. What we see here, that overall there's quite a large percentage who score a 7, so that's not bad. But then we have here those who score it 6, 5, 4, and there's quite a number who score it as 3. So that gives me the indication it's really a good time for me to come and talk to you about sleep and how you can improve it. And I thought I'll start with just sort of laying a bit of foundation, a bit of sleep facts. And again, here is a verse from the Quran which says, and among his signs is your sleep by night. So again, the same as what I said a moment ago, that we are designed, as in evolution has made us, to sleep at night and to be awake during the day. Now, why is that the case? We don't know, we only can speculate, but human vision is pretty poor during the dark, during the night phase, right? We can all see beautifully when the sun is out, when it's light, but when it's dark, we're really rubbish at seeing anything. But the big cats, the tigers, the lions, they have very good night vision. So if our ancestors, if they had been awake, and we just assume for a moment we all evolved in Africa on the savannah, had they been running around in the middle of the night, they would have easily been gobbled up by the predators, and that would have been the end of our species. So what has evolved is that we use the nighttime, the dark phase, as a rest period, right? And like I said, we are then active during the day. That's when we can go hunting and do all the things that we want to do. And as Rabia said, we spend 1/3 of our lives asleep. 1/3, that's a profound amount of time. If you think of someone maybe in your family or in your friendship group who turned 90, that person would have been asleep for 30 years of their life. Yeah? Or anyone who's been married for 60 years and sort of saying, oh, always this bickering. No, it wouldn't have been 60 years of bickering. 20 years would have been spent asleep. Right? So just to put that into perspective, what that means, right? 1/3 of our lives, 1/3 of our day, of a 24-hour day, roughly. Now, sleep, it's not just unique to us humans. We see sleep or sleep-like behavior in all animals. You can sleep deprive a fly by sort of gluing them on a plate that moves, and you shake and shake and shake. We see sleep, or I should say activity and rest behavior, in something like a worm. So sleep is by no means unique to us humans. We see rest and activity all across the animal kingdom, which shows us sleep isn't some evolutionary mistake, right? It really serves a purpose. Otherwise, why would have nature sort of invented it again and again and again? And then my final point here, when we sleep, it's not like everything is suddenly switched off. Right? It's more, the way I like to think of it, it's a shift in consciousness. So right now, while I am awake, my awareness is focused outwardly to you all. And when I sleep, that sort of focus, that awareness, that attention, sorry, I should say, that attention goes inwardly. Yeah? But the brain is still working. It's just sort of working in a slightly different way, or its activity is slightly different. And that brings me on to how we measure sleep, right? How we measure sleep, and I don't know if anyone here has been to a sleep lab for an overnight assessment. It's not very luxurious, so you haven't missed anything. So what we do is we bring people into the sleep lab and we hook them up with electrodes to measure the brain waves. And you have to put these electrodes in very specific places. There's nothing worse than one comes undone or it's just slightly in the wrong position, then you've lost a whole night's worth of data. So put the electrodes in specific places and then we record brain activity. And we see a certain fast pattern while we are awake. And that pattern then changes when we fall asleep. And it just doesn't stay the same while we sleep. It even changes while we sleep again and again and again. And that gives rise to different sleep stages. And I'll show you a very sort of simplistic diagram in a moment. But I just mentioned there are different sleep stages. And interestingly, coming back to me reading about Islam, again in the Quran, as I said, sleep is mentioned a number of times. And there are also different stages or types of sleep mentioned, which sort of map onto what we found in research as different sleep stages. And I put the names up from left to right, sort of from lighter sleep towards the deeper sleep stages. Okay, but I said I will show you a very simplified graph. So the top line, you'll see in a moment, is the brain activity when we are awake. Then we have what's called REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. And during that type of sleep, you can't move your body. Maybe a little bit the fingertips, maybe a little bit the toes. But what gives it its name is your eyeballs still move. Right? During REM sleep, the body is paralyzed. All that really moves are the eyeballs. Right? That's what it's got its name from. Commonly, it's called the dream sleep. It's called the dream sleep because that is when we have our really vivid and bizarre dreams, where you can fly without wings, where you can be underwater diving without an oxygen mask, that bizarre stuff. Those dreams, they show up in REM. Then we have N1, N2, collectively we call that light sleep. And light sleep is exactly as it says on the label, it is light sleep, meaning if you dip into this light sleep, you can easily be woken up out of that sleep, right? If someone was to say your name, you very quickly go, yeah, what is it that you want? And then we also have the deep sleep. And again, the label gives it away. Deep sleep is when you are deep under. It takes much longer for you to wake up. So anyone here who is on call, maybe a medic or in a different profession where you are allowed to sleep at night, but you could be called upon at any moment in time. The biggest thing is when you get called and you are in deep sleep. So waking up out of deep sleep, making sense of the world really takes some time. And before I work as I work now as a sleep therapist, I used to work with shift workers from safety critical industries. And we did one project in Switzerland with paramedics and helicopter pilots. And they would work 24-hour, 48-hour, 72-hour, I think up to 96-hour-long shifts. And they could be called at any time of the day, including the night. And they always said it's the worst thing. So what we implemented there, if they were called out at night, the call center would call them to wake them up, and then 5 minutes later would call again and give them the detail of the accident that had happened so that they had a chance to wake up. Yeah? Okay, so these are the stages, and here is the diagram. So on the x-axis, you can see time of day, 11 p.m. until 7 a.m. in the morning, so that's down here. And on the y-axis, you see the sleep stages. And if you just for a moment follow the blue line, you can see how we start at the wake, and then from wake we go into the lighter sleep, and then we drop down, excuse me, into the deep sleep, and then we spend some time down here in the deep sleep. And I should say deep sleep is important for the repair, for the growth, for the restoration, yeah, of the body. That's, for example, when the growth hormone is being released, when the brain, and I'll come to that in a moment, is doing sort of a wastage or clearage of any waste and toxins, memory consolidation, that starts in the light sleep, but then continues really in the deep sleep. Yeah. So we spend some time in deep sleep, and then you can see we come back up here for a short moment into light sleep, and then we go up into the REM sleep. Yeah? Like I said, where we have these vivid dreams. So, and then comes the thing, and then we come here and we are awake again. And this going down and up, and I always call it going down the ladder, coming back up, is called a sleep cycle. And a cycle takes about 90 minutes to 120 minutes. Yeah? And we, as you can see from this graph, we cycle through the night. We do this repeatedly, go down and up, down and up, down and up. And every time we come up, we briefly wake up. Now, if I will ask you, do you remember waking up at night? Some people will say yes, some people will have insomnia, and some people will say, no, I never wake up. But in fact, you do, but just for a few seconds, maybe half a minute. Not long enough for your brain to really register, unless you have to go to the bathroom, or as I said, you have insomnia, a sleep disorder where you struggle to fall or stay asleep. But for most of us, for a normal, healthy sleeper, we wake up a number of times without noticing it. Now, why do we do this? Again, we can only speculate. But if we go back to our ancestors evolving on the African savanna, they didn't sleep in well-protected homes. They slept maybe on a tree, maybe in a cave, maybe on the open savanna floor, where any predator could sort of walk by and eat them up. So what probably has happened, we know that humans evolved, always lived in groups and in tribes, that there was always someone during the night who was awake to check for safety. Yeah? So we believe that these frequent awakenings are a way of sort of quickly checking, am I safe, right? And then you roll around and you fall asleep again. Now, REM sleep, I forgot to mention this, I told you it's sort of the dream sleep. It's also important for the processing of our emotional experience of the day. It sort of takes the sting out. There's one famous paper that says sleep or REM sleep is overnight therapy. Yeah? So we process our emotional experiences so that we aren't as reactive the next day. Now, final point here that I want to make is the media often ask me, oh, Kat, what's the most important stage of sleep? Surely that's the deep sleep. To which I always say, no, they all are important. They all serve slightly different functions, and we all need these functions to be healthy, right? To show up to the best of our abilities during the next day. Yeah? So they're all important because they do slightly different things. Now, while I was doing my research about sleep and Ramadan, there's lots of inconsistencies, and there's a number of studies. I think we do need some more studies. But one thing they sort of all agreed on, that during Ramadan, there is less of the REM sleep. Now, why, we don't quite know. It could be because you're eating later. That eating later will have an impact on your core body temperature, which sort of is elevated for longer, and that is not a helpful thing for REM sleep. Another could be that you wake up earlier than usual in order to eat and also to pray. Now, if you look at my graph, what you can see, if you just for a moment look at the deep sleep, you see in the beginning of the night, there's a lot of deep sleep. And towards the end, there's less or almost nothing. Whereas if we look at REM, beginning of the night, only a little bit of REM. And towards the end of the night, there's a lot of REM. Now, if you wake up earlier than usual, you cut out this REM phase. Yeah? So that could be another sort of reason as to why. What's maybe interesting at this point is during the pandemic, when the lockdown first hit, there was a lot of anxiety, there was a lot of talk about sleep, there was a lot of talk about dreams, people suddenly dreaming or dreaming more, and sort of anxiety or stress-induced dreams. One reason there was more dream reports is that people didn't have to get up early any longer because they didn't have to commute or go to the gym, right? So they could sleep longer, which means finally they could get some of that REM sleep. They could finally get some of that dream sleep. And then, of course, it was a stressful time, and that makes sense that that would have impacted on the dreams, right? Because what's going on in our everyday life is picked up in the dreams later on at night, not one-to-one, but sort of more metaphorical. So the next question is, how much sleep do you need to wake up feeling refreshed? So I just asked you, how much do you get? Now I'm interested. How much do you need to wake up feeling refreshed? And already I see the number 8 hours. With my previous question, it was between 6 and 7 hours. Here, you're telling me actually you need more sleep in order to feel good than you're getting, right? Now, that is very, very common. I've taken these two questions from a research project from 2016, where they found exactly the same pattern that we're observing here, that there is about an hour's difference between how much sleep people get and how much sleep people need. Yeah, so there is a minus by an hour every night, certainly 5 nights during the working week. It might be a bit different on the weekend. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. We're going to go back to the presentation. And this sort of sleep gap or sleep debt, that comes at a cost. That comes at a cost, and in money terms, in the UK, it is about £40 billion a year. This was a study from 2016. That's to the economy, but of course, there are also personal costs, right? Our physical and our mental health. And you can have a think, maybe, I mean, in the interest of time, I won't do another poll, but maybe for a short moment, you can just have a think about this. How do you feel physically, cognitively, so your thinking abilities, and emotionally after a short night? Yeah. Just having a think for yourself, and it might not be after one short night, maybe after 2 or 3 short nights. Some people notice it quicker than others. But that brings me on to talk about why do we sleep? And there is no single purpose. In fact, we don't know what is the exact purpose of sleep. But what we do know, sleep is important for our health and well-being, as Rabia said before. And I really like this concept here, sleep, the brain's housekeeper. That's a title of a research paper from a few years ago. And what this really means is that sleep does all the cleaning, the restoration processes, what I said a moment ago, right? And it's quite literally the cleaner. So if you think about a house party, or here tonight, we all come here, of course, to hear my talk. We had wonderful food. But when we go, this place has to be cleaned up again, right? So that you can come back and have another event. If you don't clean up, at some point, this will get into a desolate state, and it probably will all fall apart, and that's it. And sleep, in a way, is exactly the cleanup operation after the day, after the party. And so what it does for your physical health, I mean, it does a lot. One is it seems to reduce the risk of dementia, or flipping it around, what we do see is amongst the many risk factors for dementia, poor sleep, disrupted sleep, short sleep is one sort of factor for it. What happens while we are sleeping, and it happens only in the deep sleep, is that there is a slight structural change in the size of your brain cells. They become a little bit smaller, which means there is more fluid that can wash over the brain. And what that does is it washes away all the toxins that quite naturally accumulate during the day, right? If they stay, the idea is that they contribute to the formulation of plaques. And plaques is the things that we find with people who suffer from dementia. Okay. So that's one big reason. Another is that sleep boosts our immune system. Yeah, it's sort of a healer, or it helps the body to heal. Sleep is important for our weight control, but also for our sugar control, so it reduces the risk of diabetes. Plenty of studies showing short sleep, disrupted sleep, is associated with a higher risk of type 2 diabetes. And then also cardiovascular risk and mortality as a whole. The risk goes up with poor and insufficient sleep. Then our cognitive performance, our sort of thinking abilities, and you probably all know what it feels like after a poor night, or as I said, a run of poor nights, how much harder it is to concentrate, right? To concentrate on the task in front of you, whatever that might be, whether you are sitting down working one-to-one with a person or behind a computer screen, or you're driving, whatever it is, but this simple act of paying attention is so much harder after a poor night's sleep. And then, of course, all other cognitive abilities build on our attention, our capacity for attention. Yeah. Final one is emotional regulation and mental health. And again, just thinking for a moment, how do you feel when you are lacking sleep after a poor night, when you wake up the next morning? Right? A lot of my clients will say, you know, I feel sad, I feel anxious, I feel irritable. Even I cry. I usually don't cry, but after a run of poor nights, I cry. So just reflecting for yourself, how do you feel? And also, how do I interact with my loved ones? And do I want to be around others when I'm tired? Do I want to socialize? Do I want to be with my loved ones? Usually loved ones are the ones who sort of get the grumpiness. But what research also has shown is that actually we don't really want to socialize when we are sleepy, when we're sleep deprived. And for me, that's when the alarm bells go off, because we all know loneliness and social isolation is on the rise. And poor sleep could be one factor. I'm not saying it's the factor, it's just one contributor to it. Now, what triggers poor sleep? A lot of things. And not everything will trigger it for each single one of you. But certainly uncertainty, anxiety, worry, stress, they are big common triggers. Workload, long work hours, work demands can be a trigger for poor sleep. Lack of sunlight. So being indoors all day where it's bright enough to see and work, but actually not bright enough for your body clock to know it's daytime. And the body clock, by the way, how does it know that it's daytime? Your eyes have a special receptor, not for vision, just for light detection. These receptors feed back to your clock, the light is on, or when it's dark, that the light is off. And that's how the clock knows whether it's day or night. By being indoors, too little light, or the light levels are too low for your clock, so the clock doesn't know what should I be doing. Lack of exercise, also sort of either loneliness, but sometimes family life can also be sort of a sleep disruptor for various reasons, maybe taking care of children or as a source of conflict. And then also, of course, refugees, right? Big topic right now. Refugees over-index in a way with mental health conditions and poor sleep. So yeah, just sort of maybe the top triggers. Like I said, there are plenty more. And then I said I would quickly talk about Ramadan. And results are or research finding, very inconsistent, from no difference at all to, yeah, quite some differences. I mentioned less REM sleep, probably also less sleep overall. And what's behind it is the change in lifestyle and is the change in dietary patterns, right? Eating so much later, having a shorter period, eating closer to bedtime. And there seems to be a correlation that if you eat and you go to bed within the next hour, it seems to be that you will have more disrupted sleep compared to eating and maybe leaving 3 hours and then going to bed, right? But it's then, of course, a toss-up. The later you go to sleep, you will have to wake up in the morning again. So I think there is no ideal sort of path there, but I'm going to come and talk about that probably later on. Now, what can you do? I just want to run you through a couple of sleep habits. So first of all is to find your personal sleep window, whether that is Ramadan or not. Finding out what are your sleep times and how much sleep you need. So I can't tell you all, standing here, not having spoken to you, how much sleep you need and when to sleep, right? Because everyone is different. Roughly, we say an adult needs between 7 and 9 hours every night. Some people want to go to bed early, wake up early. Some go to bed and wake up late, and the rest falls somewhere in the middle. So it's about finding out what are my sleep times and then making them consistent. Now, for Ramadan, your sleep times most likely will be different, going to bed a little later, waking up a little bit earlier for the pre-dawn meal. What I would say there, try and keep these new temporary times as regular as you can. If you want, take a nap in the afternoon, but no longer than 30 minutes and probably not after 2 o'clock, right? Just as a way of boosting yourself, giving yourself a bit of energy. And then after Ramadan, and I know I'm jumping way ahead, when you go back to your old sleep times, make that adjustment slowly. Some people can do it from one night to the next, they go back, but some sort of struggle. And then I would say just in increments, change, bring your bedtime forward again, maybe by 50 minutes each night until you come back to your normal, usual bedtime. Okay, circadian lighting. I mentioned the importance of light. We want strong light during the day, little light in the evening. In particular, again, thinking of Ramadan right now, we're making it bright when usually I would say dim the lights, right? And being in a modern society, we also use our phones a lot around sort of the evening. And that is something that research shows again and again and again, is to reduce the time in front of a screen in the evening, right? Because that phone here in your hand is like shining a mini sun in your eyes, and your clock will go, oh, it's still daytime. You can turn that off in a second, but this is a biological system. The signal will take much longer to transmit. Diet, another good way to improve or impact on our sleep. And here the idea is when you're not in Ramadan, to keep meal times as regular as you can and have a fast period of maybe 12 hours, 11 or 10 hours. I think right now, as you're going through Ramadan, what research is showing there is that the vegetarian diet with plant protein is probably the best diet to support your sleep. Yeah, so everyone who's eaten the vegetarian meal tonight, clap on the shoulder, that was the better one for your sleep. And then final one is around exercise. Exercise is always important, but what research is showing us even more so during Ramadan is to make sure that you do have regular exercise. That doesn't mean you all have to go on a 10K run or have to go to the gym every day. It also includes moving, right? Interrupting long stretches of sedentary behavior by just standing up, maybe walking, getting a glass of water, or just stretching and sitting back down. There's plenty of research that tells us long stretches of sedentary behavior has a negative impact on sleep quality. So flipping that around, more exercise, more regular exercise. And I think with that, I've come to the end. Yes, I've come to the end. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for participating in the polls.